32-year-old blogger sitting in his underwear at 3 a.m., completely broke, staring at his laptop screen with a revelation that would change millions of lives. Mark Manson had just spent the last decade chasing happiness like it was going out of style. He had vision boards covering his walls, daily affirmations that made him cringe, meditation apps, gratitude journals, and enough self-help books to build a small fortress. And he was absolutely, completely, utterly miserable. But that night, something clicked. He realized he'd been living his entire life backwards. While everyone around him was posting inspirational quotes about following your dreams and staying positive, he was drowning in his own optimism. The harder he tried to be happy, the more depressed he became. The more he focused on success, the more like a failure he felt. The more he tried to eliminate problems from his life, the more problems seemed to multiply. That moment of brutal, uncomfortable honesty changed everything. Not just for him, but for the millions of people who would discover that the secret to a good life isn't about giving more FCKS about everything. It's about giving fewer, better FCKS about the right things. If you've ever felt exhausted trying to maintain a positive attitude when everything is falling apart, if you're tired of pretending your life is Instagram perfect when it's clearly not, if you've wondered why some people seem so comfortable with being uncomfortable while you're stressed about being stressed, what you're about to discover will completely flip your worldview upside down. This isn't just another self-help story about manifesting your dreams or finding your passion. This is about why your grandmother, who lived through the Great Depression and World War II, was probably happier than you are with your smartphone and unlimited Netflix access. This is about why celebrities with everything money can buy still end up in rehab or worse. This is about why the path to an extraordinary life actually starts with accepting how deeply, fundamentally ordinary you really are. The man who figured all this out wasn't some enlightened guru sitting on a mountaintop in Tibet. He wasn't a Harvard psychologist with decades of research. He wasn't born into wealth or blessed with natural talent. He was just a regular guy from Boston who got tired of his own *T and decided to do something radical. Stop caring about all the wrong things so he could start caring about the right ones. What he discovered in that moment, and what you're about to learn, is that everything our culture teaches us about the good life is not just wrong, it's backwards. The pursuit of happiness makes you miserable. The attempt to avoid pain creates more suffering. The desire to always be right keeps you perpetually wrong. The need to feel special makes you ordinary. But here's the beautiful paradox. When you stop chasing happiness, you become happier. When you embrace pain, you suffer less. When you admit you're wrong, you become more right. When you accept your ordinary, you become capable of extraordinary things. This revelation didn't just change one blogger's life, it started a quiet revolution. Because once you understand this backwards way of thinking, you can't unsee it. You start noticing it everywhere, in the people who seem effortlessly confident versus those desperately trying to appear confident. In the relationships that last versus the ones that burn out. In the businesses that thrive versus the ones that struggle. In the lives that feel meaningful versus the ones that feel empty despite having everything. The backwards law, why everything you know about happiness is wrong. Here's what broke Mark Manson's brain and will probably break yours too. The more desperately you want something, the less likely you are to get it. The more you pursue happiness, the more elusive it becomes. The harder you try to be confident, the more insecure you feel. The more you avoid pain and discomfort, the more painful and uncomfortable your life becomes. Here's what taking responsibility actually looks like in real life. You hate your job. Your responsibility isn't to blame your boss, the company culture, or the economy. Your responsibility is to develop the skills, build the network, save the money, and take the risks necessary to find or create work that aligns with your values and goals. You're lonely and struggling with relationships. Your responsibility isn't to blame other people for not understanding you or society for being superficial. Your responsibility is to work on yourself until you become the kind of person others genuinely want to be around, to put yourself in situations where you can meet like-minded people, and to develop the social and emotional skills necessary for healthy relationships. You're out of shape and unhappy with your physical health. Your responsibility isn't to blame genetics, your metabolism, your schedule, or the food industry. Your responsibility is to educate yourself about nutrition and exercise, make the necessary changes to your diet and lifestyle, and stick with those changes long enough to see results. Notice what responsibility doesn't include. It doesn't mean everything is your fault. It doesn't mean you caused every problem in your life. It doesn't mean you should blame yourself for things that were genuinely beyond your control, especially things that happened when you were young or powerless. Responsibility means that regardless of how you got to where you are, getting to where you want to be is up to you. It means you have the power to change your life, but you also have to do the work to change it. It means you can't control what happens to you, but you can always control what you do about what happens to you. This shift from victim mentality to ownership mentality is visible in every area of someone's life. Victims complain about their problems, owners solve their problems. Victims wait for permission, owners give themselves permission. Victims focus on what they can't control, owners focus on what they can control. Victims make excuses, owners make progress. The victim mentality is seductive because it feels good in the short term. It's comforting to believe that your problems aren't your fault, that you're powerless to change your circumstances, that someone else should fix what's wrong with your life. It removes the pressure and responsibility from your shoulders and places it somewhere else. But this comfort comes at an enormous cost. When you give up responsibility, you also give up power. When you blame external factors for your problems, you make yourself dependent on external factors for your solutions. When you wait for someone else to change your life, you're likely to be waiting forever. Taking responsibility is harder in the short term, but infinitely more empowering in the long term. It means acknowledging that you have more control over your life than you might want to admit. It means accepting that your current situation is largely the result of your past decisions and behaviors. It means admitting that if you want different results, you need to make different choices. But here's the beautiful part. Once you truly accept responsibility for your life, you realize you have way more power than you thought. Every problem becomes solvable because you're no longer waiting for external circumstances to change. You're focused on what you can do differently. Every setback becomes temporary because you know you have the ability to recover and adapt. People who take responsibility for their lives don't have fewer problems than everyone else. They just get better at solving problems. They don't have more advantages. They just make better use of whatever advantages they have. They don't get luckier. They put themselves in positions where luck is more likely to find them. The most successful people in any field understand this principle deeply. They don't waste energy complaining about unfair circumstances. They adapt to circumstances and find ways to succeed anyway. They don't wait for perfect conditions. They create conditions that work for them. They don't expect life to be fair. They focus on being effective regardless of fairness. This is the responsibility revolution. The moment you stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What am I going to do about this?" is the moment your life begins to change. Not because your circumstances immediately improve, but because you become the kind of person who can handle any circumstances and turn them into opportunities for growth and success. The certainty trap: why being wrong is right. Human beings are absolutely addicted to being right. We would rather be right and miserable than wrong and happy. We would rather stick to our beliefs and fail spectacularly than question our beliefs and succeed beyond our wildest dreams. And this addiction to certainty, this desperate need to always be right about everything, is keeping millions of people trapped in lives that simply don't work. Think about the last time you genuinely changed your mind about something important. Not just tweaked your opinion slightly or adjusted your perspective a little bit, but really, fundamentally changed your mind about something you previously believed with complete certainty. It probably felt uncomfortable, maybe even scary or disorienting. That discomfort you felt? That's your ego dying a little death, and your ego absolutely hates that feeling. But here's what Mark Manson discovered, and what separates successful people from everyone else. The people who are most successful, happiest, and mentally healthiest are the ones who are comfortable being wrong. They're not necessarily smarter than everyone else, more talented, or blessed with better circumstances. They're just more willing to update their beliefs when they encounter new information that contradicts their existing worldview. Most people would rather be consistently wrong than inconsistently right. They'd rather stick to a belief system that's making them miserable than admit they might have been looking at things the wrong way. They'd rather stay in a career that's slowly killing their soul than admit they chose the wrong path. They'd rather remain in a relationship that stopped working years ago than admit they might have picked the wrong person or that they've grown in incompatible directions. This need to be right all the time is not just limiting, it's exhausting. It means you can never truly learn anything new because learning requires admitting that your current knowledge is incomplete. You can never grow because growth means acknowledging that your current way of being isn't perfect. You can never improve your life because improvement means accepting that your current life isn't ideal. Think about how much energy you spend defending your beliefs, your choices, your opinions, and your identity. Think about how often you find yourself in arguments where you're not actually trying to understand the other person's perspective or find the truth. You're just trying to prove that you're right and they're wrong. Think about how many opportunities you might have missed because they didn't fit with your preconceived notions about how things should work. The most successful people treat their beliefs like software that needs constant updates. They're not emotionally attached to being right about any particular thing. They're attached to getting better results. They don't defend their old ideas when they stop working. They evolve those ideas. They don't see changing their mind as a sign of weakness or inconsistency. They see it as a sign of intelligence and adaptability. Warren Buffett, one of the most successful investors in history, says his success comes largely from his willingness to admit when he's wrong about an investment and change course quickly. He doesn't hold on to losing stocks because he's emotionally attached to being right about his initial decision. He cuts his losses and moves on. Scientists understand this principle deeply. The entire scientific method is built on the assumption that our current understanding is probably incomplete or wrong in some way, and that progress comes from constantly testing our beliefs against reality and updating them when they don't match up. The best scientists aren't the ones who are never wrong. They're the ones who are wrong quickly and learn from it faster than everyone else. But in our personal lives, we tend to operate more like lawyers than scientists. Instead of testing our beliefs against reality, we look for evidence that supports what we already believe and ignore evidence that contradicts it. Instead of updating our worldview when it stops serving us, we double down on it and try harder to make reality conform to our expectations. This shows up everywhere. In relationships, people often stay stuck in patterns that don't work because admitting that their approach to love and intimacy needs work feels like admitting failure. In careers, people stay in jobs they hate because changing direction would mean admitting they made a mistake or that their parents' advice wasn't perfect. In finances, people stick with investment strategies that aren't working because changing course would mean admitting they don't know as much about money as they thought they did. In health, people continue habits that are slowly killing them because changing would mean admitting that their lifestyle choices have been wrong. Here's a life-changing question that will make you uncomfortable. What if you're completely wrong about the thing you're most certain about? What if your approach to relationships is backwards? What if your career strategy is fundamentally flawed? What if your beliefs about money, success, happiness, or what makes life meaningful are keeping you stuck? The people who are willing to seriously consider these questions and honestly examine their answers are the ones who break through to levels of success and fulfillment that seemed impossible before. The people who refuse to ask these questions, who are too attached to being right to risk being wrong, stay exactly where they are, wondering why everyone else seems to be moving forward while they're standing still. Being wrong isn't failure, it's information. Every time you discover you were wrong about something, you've learned something valuable that brings you closer to being right. Every mistake you make eliminates one approach that doesn't work, which brings you closer to finding an approach that does work. The goal isn't to never be wrong, that's impossible and boring. The goal is to be wrong quickly, learn from it rapidly, and use that information to make better decisions going forward. The goal is to hold your beliefs lightly, test them against reality regularly, and update them when they stop serving you. When you become comfortable with being wrong, you become capable of being more right than you ever thought possible. When you stop defending your current beliefs and start exploring better beliefs, you open yourself up to possibilities you couldn't even see before. When you embrace uncertainty instead of fighting it, you become antifragile, someone who gets stronger from volatility and chaos instead of weaker. The failure advantage, why losing is winning. Our entire society has programmed you to fear failure like it's death itself. We treat failure like it's shameful, embarrassing, something to hide from friends and family, something to avoid at all costs even if avoiding it means never really trying anything meaningful. But what if everything you've been taught about failure is not just wrong, but completely backwards? What if failure isn't the opposite of success? What if it's the raw material that success is built from? Here's a truth that will change how you see everything. Every single person you admire, respect, or want to be like has failed more times than you have even attempted anything. They didn't succeed despite their failures, they succeeded because of their failures. Each failure taught them something essential, eliminated an approach that didn't work, and brought them one step closer to an approach that did work. But most people never get to experience this transformative power of failure because they're so terrified of failing that they never really try anything. They take safe jobs that they hate because they're guaranteed. They pursue safe relationships that feel dead because they're predictable. They live safe, small lives that feel empty because they're secure. And then they spend their entire lives wondering why they feel so unfulfilled and why other people seem to be living such interesting, meaningful lives. Here's what Mark Manson learned from studying successful people across every field. The pain of failure is temporary and educational, but the pain of regret lasts forever and teaches you nothing. The embarrassment of trying something and falling short fades within weeks or months, but the shame of never trying at all follows you to your grave. Think about your biggest regrets in life. I'm willing to bet that most of them aren't things you tried and failed at, they're things you never tried at all. Opportunities you didn't take because you were afraid of failing. Relationships you didn't pursue because you were afraid of rejection. Dreams you didn't chase because you were afraid of disappointment. The disappointment of not getting what you want is nothing compared to the regret of never going after what you want in the first place. At least when you fail, you learn something valuable. When you don't try, you learn nothing except that you're willing to let fear make your decisions for you. But here's the beautiful thing about failure. It's not something that happens to you, it's something you do. It's an action, not an identity. You fail at things, but that doesn't make you a failure. You make mistakes, but that doesn't make you a mistake. You experience setbacks, but that doesn't mean you're set back as a person. The most successful people have simply failed their way to success. They've tried more things, failed at more things, learned from more things, and tried again more times than everyone else. While other people were avoiding failure, successful people were collecting it like Pokémon cards. Every failure is valuable information. It tells you what doesn't work, which brings you closer to finding what does work. Every no you receive brings you statistically closer to a yes. Every rejection brings you closer to acceptance. Every mistake brings you closer to mastery. But you only get this valuable information if you're willing to risk getting it. Thomas Edison didn't fail 1,000 times before inventing the light bulb. He found 1,000 ways that didn't work, which brought him closer to the one way that did work. Michael Jordan didn't become the greatest basketball player of all time despite being cut from his high school team. He became great because being cut motivated him to work harder than anyone else. Steven Spielberg didn't become a legendary filmmaker despite being rejected from film school twice. He became legendary because the rejections forced him to find alternative paths that ultimately served him better. But you have to be willing to reframe failure completely. Instead of seeing failure as evidence that you're not good enough, see it as evidence that you're trying things that are worth attempting. Instead of seeing failure as proof that you should give up, see it as information about what to try next. Instead of seeing failure as a reflection of your worth as a person, see it as the price of admission to a life worth living. The people who avoid failure don't get to experience success either, because success and failure are two sides of the same coin. You can't have one without risking the other. The people who play it safe and never fail also never win anything meaningful. They avoid the pain of failure, but they also miss out on the joy of accomplishment. Here's what's really twisted about our fear of failure. We're afraid of other people judging us for failing, but the people whose opinions we're worried about are usually people who haven't attempted anything worth failing at. We're seeking approval from people who have never put themselves on the line, never taken meaningful risks, never tried to build something significant. Meanwhile, the people who have actually accomplished things that matter understand that failure is part of the process. They don't judge you for failing, they judge you for not trying. They don't lose respect for people who attempt difficult things and fall short. They lose respect for people who avoid difficult things altogether. The secret to dealing with failure is to fail fast, fail cheap, and fail forward. Try things quickly and inexpensively so that when they don't work out, you haven't wasted much time or money. Learn from each failure so that your next attempt is more informed than your last one. And always be moving towards something rather than just away from your current situation. When you embrace failure as a necessary part of success, everything changes. You become more willing to take risks because you're not afraid of the downside. You become more resilient because you've practiced bouncing back from setbacks. You become more confident because your confidence is based on your ability to handle whatever happens, not on your ability to avoid anything bad from happening. Most people's confidence is fragile because it's based on never being wrong, never failing, never being rejected. But that kind of confidence shatters the moment something goes wrong. Real confidence comes from knowing that you can handle failure, learn from it, and use it to become better than you were before. The death advantage. Your mortality is your superpower. Here's the most uncomfortable truth in this entire conversation, and also the most liberating. You're going to die. Everyone you love is going to die. Everything you're worried about right now will be completely irrelevant in 100 years. Every problem that's keeping you up at night, every source of stress and anxiety, every relationship drama and career concern, none of it will matter when you're gone. This sounds morbid and depressing, but it's actually the most powerful perspective you can adopt. When you really, truly accept that your time here is limited, it changes absolutely everything about how you approach life. You stop wasting energy on things that don't matter. You stop putting off things that do matter. You stop caring what people think about choices that make you happy. You stop living someone else's idea of a good life and start living your own. Most people live like they're immortal. They act like they have unlimited time to figure everything out, unlimited chances to make things right, unlimited opportunities to become who they want to be. This illusion of infinite time is what keeps people stuck in jobs they hate for decades, relationships that stopped working years ago, and patterns of behavior that make them miserable. But the people who remember they're mortal become absolutely unstoppable. They don't have time for drama that doesn't serve their goals. They don't have patience for people who consistently drain their energy. They don't have space in their lives for activities that don't align with their values or contribute to their growth. Steve Jobs, in his famous Stanford commencement speech, talked about how remembering that he was going to die was the most important tool he ever encountered to help him make big choices in life. Because almost everything external expectations, pride, fear of embarrassment, or failure falls away in the face of death, leaving only what is truly important. When you really internalize your mortality, you realize that most of the things you worry about are completely insignificant. You're stressed about what people think of your outfit. You'll be dead in a few decades, and so will they. You're anxious about a presentation at work. In 5 years, no one will remember it. You're avoiding a difficult conversation with someone you love. Time is running out to have that conversation. This perspective doesn't make you morbid, depressed, or nihilistic. It makes you focused and intentional. It helps you separate what's truly important from what just feels urgent in the moment. It gives you permission to disappoint people in small ways so you don't disappoint yourself in big ways. Death isn't the enemy of a good life. It's what gives life meaning and urgency. Without death, nothing would really matter because you'd have infinite time to do everything. With death, everything matters because you have to choose what's worth your limited time, energy, and attention. Think about how differently you would live if you knew you only had 1 year left. You probably wouldn't spend much time scrolling social media or watching Netflix. You wouldn't waste energy on gossip or petty conflicts. You wouldn't stay in relationships that don't fulfill you or jobs that don't utilize your talents. You'd focus on what really matters: the people you love, the experiences that bring you joy, the contributions you want to make to the world. But here's the thing, you don't know how much time you have left. It could be 50 years, it could be 50 days. The uncertainty of when you'll die should create the same urgency as knowing you'll die soon. Every day you waste living someone else's life is a day you can't get back. Every month you spend in a situation that doesn't serve you is a month stolen from your limited supply. The awareness of death also puts failure and rejection into perspective. What's the worst thing that could happen if you try something and it doesn't work out? You fail, learn something, and try again. What's the worst thing that could happen if you don't try? You reach the end of your life wondering what could have been. When you're on your deathbed, you're not going to regret the risks you took that didn't work out. You're going to regret the risks you didn't take. You're not going to regret the times you looked foolish pursuing something you cared about. You're going to regret the times you played it safe to avoid looking foolish. This perspective also transforms how you approach relationships. When you remember that your time with the people you love is limited, you become less likely to take them for granted. You're more likely to express your love, resolve conflicts quickly, and prioritize quality time together. You're less likely to hold grudges or let pride prevent you from apologizing or forgiving. The Stoic philosophers understood this principle thousands of years ago. They practiced what they called memento mori, remember death, not to become obsessed with dying, but to become more alive. Not to become fearful, but to become grateful. Not to become paralyzed, but to become purposeful. Marcus Aurelius, one of the most powerful men in human history, wrote in his personal journal, "Think of yourself as dead. You have lived your life. Now take what's left and live it properly." He wasn't being morbid, he was reminding himself that life is precious precisely because it's temporary. When you really get that you're not going to be here forever, you stop living like you're going to be here forever. You stop procrastinating on important goals because someday might never come. You stop avoiding difficult conversations because you might not get another chance to have them. You stop putting off experiences that would bring you joy because the opportunity might not last. You start making decisions based on what matters to you, not what matters to everyone else. You start saying yes to experiences that align with your values and no to everything that doesn't. You start treating your time like the precious, non-renewable resource it actually is. The awareness of death doesn't make life meaningless, it makes life urgent. It doesn't make your problems irrelevant, it helps you focus on problems that are actually worth solving. It doesn't make you careless, it makes you selective about what deserves your care. The revolution begins. Your life is happening right now. Remember that blogger sitting in his underwear at 3 a.m., completely broke, staring at his laptop screen with a life-changing realization. That moment of brutal, uncomfortable honesty didn't just transform Mark Manson's existence. It started a quiet revolution in how millions of people think about success, happiness, and what it means to live a meaningful life. You now understand that happiness isn't something you chase like a dog chasing its own tail. It's something that emerges naturally when you stop demanding it and start embracing life's inevitable struggles. You know that you have a limited supply of mental and emotional energy, and that the difference between successful people and everyone else isn't talent or luck. It's being incredibly selective about what deserves your investment. You've learned that problems aren't obstacles to overcome. They're the raw material that meaningful lives are built from. The goal isn't to eliminate struggle from your existence, but to choose struggles that are worth struggling through. You've discovered that entitlement isn't empowerment. It's a prison that keeps you waiting for life to hand you things instead of going out and earning them. You understand that taking responsibility for your life doesn't mean blaming yourself for everything that's happened to you. It means recognizing that your response to everything that happens to you determines who you become and where you end up. You've realized that being wrong isn't weakness. It's the only way to eventually be right about things that actually matter. You know that failure isn't the opposite of success. It's the price of admission to a life worth living. Every person you admire became admirable by failing more often than you've even tried, learning from those failures, and trying again with better information. And most importantly, you understand that remembering you're going to die isn't about being morbid, it's about being truly alive. When you accept that your time here is limited, everything changes. You stop wasting energy on things that don't matter and start investing it in things that do. This is your moment. Right now, today, you can choose to keep living the way you've been living, spreading your energy across 1,000 things that don't really matter, trying to be everything to everyone, avoiding discomfort, chasing happiness, and wondering why life feels so exhausting and empty. Or you can choose to live like someone who understands what you now understand. You can choose your struggles instead of letting them choose you. You can choose your problems instead of accepting whatever problems happen to show up. You can choose what deserves your limited supply of mental and emotional energy instead of giving it away to whoever demands it loudest. You can choose to take responsibility for your responses to everything that happens to you, which means taking back control of your life. You can choose to be wrong about things quickly so you can be right about things that matter. You can choose to fail at things worth attempting instead of succeeding at things that don't matter. The subtle art of not giving a *CK isn't about caring less, it's about caring better. It's not about becoming indifferent to everything, it's about becoming intentional about the right things. It's not about avoiding pain and struggle, it's about choosing pain and struggle that serves a purpose. Your life is happening right now. Not tomorrow when you figure everything out, not next year when conditions are perfect, not someday when you feel ready. Right now. And right now, you have everything you need to start giving fewer, better *CKS about things that actually matter to who you want to become and how you want to live. The revolution begins with you. The choice is yours. Choose wisely because you don't get to make this choice forever.